Okay, the reading for today is Sakaguchi Ango's In the Forest Under Cherries in Full Bloom. The original is桜の森の満開の下, published in 1949, and the translation is by J. Rubin. And Sakaguchi Ango, born in 1906, lived through the war, died in 1955, novelist, essayist, born in Niigata Prefecture. He was one of a group of young Japanese writers to rise to prominence in the years immediately following Japan's defeat in World War II. And this group is usually referred to as the Buraiha, sometimes the Shingesaku Ha. It includes Dazai Osamu, Oda Sakunosuke, Ishikawa Jun, Sakaguchi Ango. But you don't need to worry about any of that. Just sort of know that general word. The Buraiha group that he's usually affiliated with. And I think Donald Keene, in his big anthology or history of modern Japanese literature, Dawn to the West, he includes his comments on Sakaguchi Ango's writings in this chapter called the Buraiha chapter. Alright, but that's not that important. In 1946, Sakaguchi Ango wrote his famous essay titled Darakuron on Decadence, which examined the role of Bushido during war. Alright, and the essay is noted for its sort of irreverent attitude toward Japanese tradition, towards the authorities and the elites and the military rulers and the entire culture that led Japan to catastrophe in the war. Alright, but this work we're reading today is a little bit different. It's more along the lines of a fantasy work. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into the questions. There are 16 questions in all. It's a fairly short story, but there's a lot to deal with there, so I want you to answer all of these questions to the best of your ability. Number 1, identify the narrator and the point of view. Where is the narrator? In what era is he located? What is his style of narrative? Does he use more showing or telling? Remember, I talked about these two important literary terms in the 13 points to keep in mind when reading narrative video. Showing is representation, direct representation from the narrator's perspective. Telling is sort of more dramatic or theater-like presentation of conversations between the characters, etc., which is used more here. What is the narrator's attitude toward the events he is describing, right? So it seems, if I remember correctly, this narrator in this story is an extra-diegetic narrator, right? He doesn't exist in the world of the Sanzoku, of the bandit and the woman. He exists in another world, in another time. We call that an extra-diegetic narrator, right? And he's looking back on a past time and telling the story of a previous age, I think. Okay, so describe the narrator. Number 2, the narrator begins his story by explaining the different attitudes toward cherry blossoms, past and present. Explain these different attitudes, right? How did the ancients, or the pre-modern Japanese, view the cherry blossoms and hanami, the custom of hanami, and how are cherry blossoms viewed now, right? There are very different ways of looking at them, according to the narrator. Explain those differences. Straightforward question. Number 3, describe the male protagonist of the story, the Sanzoku, I think is the word in Japanese. Describe his occupation, his personality, circumstances, intellectual capacity, education, motivations, desires, etc. Okay, just describe him. What motivates him? What does he desire? Describe the beautiful woman number 4. Describe the beautiful woman he kidnaps and makes his 8th wife. Describe her personality, looks, worldview, her ethics or lack thereof, proclivities, fancies, behavior, motivations, desires, background, circumstances. Note that her background is very different than the background of the Sanzoku, of the man, right? They come from very different classes. attitude toward her husband. How is she different from the other 7 wives? By the way, I just remembered this story was made into a anime in the 1980s, I think. You might be able to find it online. I think we watched it in one of my classes a few years ago. Number 5. Why is the sensation felt by the narrator when standing under the cherry blossoms in full bloom identical to the sensation when in the presence of his 8th wife? I think this is a bit of foreshadowing here, right? When he stands under the cherry blossoms in full view, he feels the same sensation that he feels when he's around his 8th wife, right? So obviously, from the beginning, there is established some sort of connection between the space underneath the full blooming cherry blossoms and his wife. What is that connection? Explain this. Number 6. What demands does the woman make to her new husband? Right, from the get-go, she's very demanding. She makes all kinds of demands. What are these demands? Identify and describe each of them. Number 7. Describe the power relationship between the man and woman. Who is on top, as it were, right? So power dynamics are always very important when you're reading works of Japanese literature, especially in the works of Tanizaki and Sakaguchi, Ango, and Dazai Osamu, and these Natsume Soseki, these writers. Who's on top in the relationship? Fairly straightforward question, but keep in mind that it's not always so clear. It might appear that character A is on top, and character A may perform the role of the person who is inferior, but in fact, they may be calling the shots from that sort of feigned position of inferior position. Number 8. Describe their life after moving to the capital, right? So the woman convinces the man to leave the wild mountains and move to the capital, and they move there and describe their life after moving to the capital. How does the man adjust to his life in the city? Does he like it? Does he feel at home, or does he feel out of place? How do the other city dwellers regard and treat him? Right, straightforward question about the plot. Number 9, describe the wife's head collecting hobby, right? So she acquires a strange hobby of collecting the severed heads of people that he kills, right? How does she acquire the decapitated heads? What does she do with them once she has them? Explain, right? What sort of satisfaction does she gain from performing this weird ritual? Alright, number 10 is discuss the imagery symbolism in this passage. Okay, I won't read the whole passage, 3 paragraphs in total. It begins, but the woman's desire was endless, and now he was bored with that too. Her desire was like a bird flying straight across the sky with no end in sight, flying on and on without rest, never tiring, slicing cleanly through the wind. Alright, it seems here that Sakaguchi Ango is trying to say something more general too about the nature of female desire, I think. His narrator's comments here are not really limited to this woman, but to female desire in general, I think. But yeah, comment on these 3 paragraphs. The man was but an ordinary bird, right? So the woman is a kind of extraordinary creature whose desire is never ending and keeps flying on and on. But the man, by contrast, is ordinary, right? So he's describing the essence of male and female, and obviously the female is far more inclined toward the infinite and whatnot. Number 11. Why does the bandit come to the decision that he must, in quotes, bring down the sky and kill his wife, right? The sky is from the beginning, from that passage that we just read in question number 10. The sky, I think, is connected with the female character in the story, right? So by bringing down the sky, he brings down her, as it were, right? So why does he come to this decision to bring down the sky and kill his own wife? Number 12. Explain the significance of this curious passage that appears toward the end of the work. Is she me, the bandit, he wondered. Was I the bird that flew straight across the sky with no end? If I kill her, will I be killing myself? So there's a strange passage where he considers the possibility that the woman is not something other after all. That he is in fact her, she is in fact him. What is the meaning of this curious speculation? Number 13. What happens the day they return to the mountains? Alright, so they live in the city for a while, but he eventually convinces her that they need to move back to the mountains, and she consents. At least it seems that she consents and willfully goes back with him. What is strange, natural about the scene they encounter when they return to the mountains? Okay, straightforward question about the plot. Number 14. Describe the atmosphere under the cherry blossoms in the final scene. What happens to the woman? Why is the man now able to sit under the cherry blossoms, the cherry forest in full bloom, without a feeling of dread and loneliness? Okay? So you remember in the beginning he described how every time he sits under this cherry blossom in full bloom, he feels this terrible dread and loneliness and can't stay there for more than a few moments, right? But now that sense of dread and fear disappears. Why? Right? And how does that relate to what has happened to the woman? Number 15, symbols, right? What symbols can you find in the work? And there are several. The most important, of course, being the cherry blossom tree in full bloom. But there are others as well, I think. Identify these, find these, and describe them and their significance. Number 16. In the final characters, the two die. Both characters die, not just the woman, right? When the woman dies, he eventually dies too. There seems to be some sort of causal relationship between her death and his death. Why is this? Explain. Alright? Okay. I should note that this is actually, never mind that note. Okay, so read the story, answer all of these questions, read the Japanese if you're able to. I will distribute that as well. If you have any questions, send me an email. Goodbye.